Welcome back to the Stephen A. Smith Show. I want to get into a serious headline from the world of politics. Police in Pennsylvania have arrested a man they say broke into Governor Josh Shapiro's residence early Sunday and started a fire while Shapiro and his family were sleeping. Shapiro, his wife Lori, their 4 children, and another family were forced to evacuate the home, which was significantly damaged by the fire. Thankfully, no injuries were reported. 38-year-old Cody Balmer turned himself into police and is being held on charges that include attempted murder, aggravated arson, and terrorism. According to an affidavit, Balmer said he was angry with the governor and would have beaten him with a hammer if confronted. I'm going to repeat that. He would have beaten him with a hammer if confronted. There is a quote from the fire chief in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And he says, "I have absolutely no compassion for anybody who commits such heinous crimes." Fire Chief Brian Enterline told the New York Post following a press conference Monday, just hours after Balmer lobbed multiple Molotov cocktails into Governor Josh Shapiro's home early Sunday morning. He said, "To anybody that affects my firefighters and American citizens, you don't deserve any of the luxuries that we have here when you create such heinous acts against our own people." That's what he had to say. He said, "I would hope that they send him to El Salvador for a tough crime, and absolutely I would support that 100%, the fire chief continued. He has no business getting any of the luxuries that we have to offer here in the United States of America." I have to tell y'all, ladies and gentlemen, I don't disagree with a single syllable the fire chief uttered. And before I explain why, I'm going to put up this quote from Governor Josh Shapiro so you see what he had to say via tweet in the aftermath of what transpired. He said, "Last night at about 2 a.m., my family and I woke up to bangs on the door from the Pennsylvania State Police after an arsonist set fire to the governor's residence in Harrisburg. The Harrisburg Bureau of Fire was on the scene, and while they worked to put out the fire, we were evacuated from the residence safely by Pennsylvania State Police and assisted by Capitol Police. Thank God no one was injured and the fire was extinguished. Every day we stand with the law enforcement and first responders who run towards danger to protect our communities. Last night they did so for our family, and Lori and I are eternally grateful to them for keeping us safe. At Pennsylvania State Police is on the scene leading this investigation and will keep the public updated," end quote. The fire chief, back to him, is absolutely correct. See, ladies and gentlemen, this is what I talk about when we're talking about little old me as a sports commentator being a presidential candidate. Think about the vitriol that exists on both sides of the aisle. I'm not going to accuse any politician of being at fault for this heinous act. Mr. Balmer should be thrown under the jail. There were children in there, 2 adults, a different family. And what does he say to the police? "I would have beat him up with a hammer if I could have." Clearly, you want to inflict violence. Why? We don't know whether this is anti-Semitism or not, but there is no doubt that there will be people who are supporters of Governor Josh Shapiro who will say so, and who's to say they are wrong? Anti-Semitism is certainly a problem that exists in this country right now, especially in light of what's been transpiring over in Gaza and other areas with the Palestinians and Israelis. We all know what's been going on over the last year and a half or so, if not more. But here's the deal. We can't have this as a society. We can't make this okay. And the rhetoric that we spew, we have to be very, very careful because of the potential impact that it has. I've often said this as a sports guy. In the end, no matter what you say, outside of the actual participants whose livelihoods are directly affected, for the rest of us, it's a game. We're covering games, and we're covering the exploits of magnificent athletes that most, if not all of us, wish we could be but can't. It's just that simple. But when you're talking about politics, that's real life. When you're talking about the economy, when you're talking about inflation, when you're talking about the potential of a recession, when you're talking about the borders, when you're talking about safety in the streets, when you're talking about national security, when you're talking about taxes, when you're talking about inflation, when you're talking about healthcare, you're talking about real life issues. And when you're doing that, you have a responsibility to make sure that you are incredibly, incredibly sensitive to the potential fallout of one's words and actions about what transpires in our nation's capital, along with our state and local governments. Now, one would say that has absolutely nothing. I'm certainly not pointing the finger at Governor Shapiro. I'm simply saying the vitriol emanating from folks arrive in large part due to how folks believe their personal lives are being affected, or that of their loved ones, communities, etc. Which is why, to me, it's important to be moderate and centrist. Understanding that both sides don't get everything they want. Understanding that both sides have to engage in compromise. Understanding that both sides need to be pulled from the fringes to the center. Pulled from the fringes to the center is incredibly important. Why do I say that? I say that because if both sides have something to complain about equally, but even more to celebrate, then people are not just thinking about what they have to lose, they're also thinking about what they have to gain. And as a result, decorum and common sense kicks into the equation, and we don't have to worry about the level of vitriol we're witnessing. We have to think about that. We have an obligation to think about that. That's why you've been seeing me talk about these issues on this show. That's why you saw me on This Week on ABC. That's why you'll see me on Hannity's show and Cuomo's show. That's why you'll hear about me leaving the door open, even though I have no desire to be a politician. Not with the kind of success that I've been enjoying in my career. Why the hell would I want to do that? There's only one reason. If the world is so jacked up that whatever I achieve doesn't even matter, because nothing but mayhem and degradation is surrounding me in our society. That's the only incentive. I think Josh Shapiro has the potential to be an excellent Democratic nominee for the presidency of the United States of America. I think some people fear that. Maybe even Mr. Ballmer himself. I've mentioned names like Wes Moore, governor of Maryland. I've mentioned names like former governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo. I'll continue to mention others as the names come along. But the goal is common sense, a pull to the center from both sides of the aisle. Just like we got people on the left worried about what they're worried about, whether it was woke or cancel culture or abortion, or now with what Trump is doing with the tariffs and how it's potentially hurting small businesses in this country, even though some small business members say they are in support of the tariffs. Far more might say otherwise. You got other people on the right talking about, what about a third term? Like Steve Bannon going on with Bill Maher in real time this past Friday, talking about circumventing the 22nd Amendment of the Constitution so Trump could run for a third term. Implemented in the Constitution in 1947, ratified in 1951. Oh, you're going to sit up there and say, well, it's relatively new. And just like there were people that worked to make modifications and alterations and changes to the Constitution back then, we could do it now. Hell to the no. We got to come to the center. Otherwise, we'll be talking about the lives of the few flourishing at the flagrant expense of the very many. We can't have that. We got to be in search of more things to celebrate, not more things to lament.